Hello and welcome to What the Tech from Boast, where we talk with some of the brilliant minds behind new and exciting tech initiatives to learn what it takes to tackle technological uncertainty and eventually change the world. I'm Paul Davenport, Boast resident tech journalist, and today I'm thrilled to welcome to the show Float co-founder Ruslan Nikolaev. At Float, Ruslan and his team are building Canada's smartest corporate cards while combining banking, payments, and spend management in one intelligent platform purpose-built for Canadian businesses. His team is on a mission to simplify business finance in Canada, with Float already being trusted by 7,000 plus companies to help finance teams save, improve compliance, and scale with confidence. It's an amazing mission, and it's very aligned with what we are very focused on here at Boast. And I can't wait to pick Ruslan's brain on his path through Canada's tech and business ecosystem and what's on deck for Float heading into fall 2026. So, without further ado, welcome to the show, Ruslan.
Thanks for having me. Great to be here, and looking forward to diving in deep and chatting about tech and where it's headed. Yeah.
I love to hear it. So, I'd love to hear. I know I just gave a little bit of your grounding in terms of where you've come from and what your goals are at Float, but tell us about yourself. I want to hear why you have this entrepreneurial spirit. What inspired you to get into the sector that you're in? And yeah, what's the genesis story behind you and Float?
Yeah, for sure. We started off with Float back in 2020. I went to University of Waterloo. I met one of my co-founders there. We studied computer science together in university, and have both been engineers by education. Always wanted to build a product. Always wanted to create an impact, and help solve a really meaningful problem for people, frankly, and for the country we're in. We run into the space, frankly, from personal pain points, having to deal with expense reports, having to pay out of pocket, having to relocate for a lot of jobs back in university. And every single time, it's the same story. You move to a new city, the company offers to reimburse you, some money for rent, for relocation expenses, things like that. It's a great perk and benefit, but you simply sometimes can't put it on your personal credit card because it just doesn't work. Sometimes the expense is too high. For myself, being an international student in Canada, I didn't have a really great credit card to lean on or a credit limit to lean on. So having to take jobs in the US, which I was exceptionally excited about, but not being able to get my money back from US companies was a really painful experience. So I think dealing with that firsthand pain point was initially what inspired us to start a business. I think the rest of it and how we really expanded our vision over time really came from dealing with all the same pain points that I think every SMB deals or founder deals with when they get started here in Canada, which change our perception in terms of how big this problem is, frankly, and how much it's actually slowing down businesses behind the scenes. And it's nobody talks about this, right? Like it's not the fun, it's not like the most AI centric area of how business operate, at least for now. But it is definitely something that really slows business down. Things like access to capital, things like access to financial infrastructure, rails in the country. Even the idea that you still have to go to a branch very often to send a wire transfer, even though you might be banking with one of the big banks in the country and
Yep.
storing hundreds of thousands of dollars of cash with them. That just felt unacceptable to us, and that's really what expanded our vision from a personal pain point of dealing with expense reports, having to pay out of pocket, not always having access to maybe the money that's needed to support the business expenses, um, to really trying to tackle the full sort of finance infrastructure for Canadian businesses problem end to end. So Flow today, as you mentioned, does a little bit of everything from corporate cards to business accounts that give you very high interest rates out of the box with no lockups and no minimums, way higher than what a traditional big five bank in Canada would offer to you. Has access to all the payments rails completely digitally in Canada, US. So you don't have to deal with the friction of going to a branch every single time you need to make a payment. And offers 10x lower FX services, and all of it is just packaged into a software solution that actually is intuitive and easy to use, rather than dealing with legacy software platforms that don't scale to the modern workflows. And we'll touch probably a little bit on AI later, but when you think about the new age of where AI is headed and how much leverage that technology can also bring to Canadian businesses and finance teams, um, it's really hard to imagine that leverage coming on top of a legacy software platform. And we really believe that building this core foundations for financial infrastructure, it was going to unlock all that leverage that will come with AI very soon down the road.
So many things you just said there really jumped out to me as kind of perfect because what you're talking about is that like old processes are inhibiting agility. I know that goes without saying, but to your point, even about just like the cross border of it all, and also when you're giving people perks,
Yeah.
how can they action on those perks? Because it's going to slow down your ability to scale. It's going to slow down your ability to actually be satisfying your own team, even with the perks that you're offering,
Yeah.
if you're not actually giving them the ability to access them at the end of the day. And
It-
again, I'm the American on the Canadian company, so I'd love to hear
well,
your, yeah.
the funny thing is that like this experience exists very much of like some of the leading, most sophisticated like US companies too, right? And in fact, like a lot of the stuff we've experienced actually came from US companies that try to maybe employ Canadian workforce and things like that. So it's not, it is very focused on Canadian businesses and giving access to Canadian businesses. But I think the opportunity is actually way bigger than that. And Yeah, like to your point, it seems small, but it really adds up. And something that felt like a perk before actually turns into a chore, right? So
Yeah.
you are getting money back, or you are getting paid for your rent for free when you get relocated to a new city for your job, for example, which is an awesome perk. But it turns into so much of a chore that you don't even appreciate it that much at that point.
Absolutely. And I think the other thing too that is maybe the biggest point I want to pull out here is that you felt this problem acutely. Like this was something that you actually experienced. So you're solving a problem that you have intimately understood because you were experiencing the pain of it all and you found a solution and it wasn't just for the sake of building a business. You actually wanted to tackle a problem, not just make a business for the sake of making a business, which I think is what sets apart powerful companies like Float that are able to expand and actually deliver on what people need versus people who might just go in there cynically being like, oh, hey, I can put a new AI wrapper around a problem. That's not what you guys are doing here. So I'd love if you could expand on that a little bit too. Just how are you using tech to make sure that you're solving a problem that you know well and that you understand will compound and actually impact business growth if we don't find a better way?
Yeah, totally. And I think from the beginning when we started working the space, we knew that there was a large business opportunity here, but there's orders of operations to how you build a business, right? And how you create something that's really impactful for your customers, to your point, that actually solves their problem. And we've been relentless about that in the beginning. Like that, we had a lot of discipline, and I'm very glad we did to really nail down the problem initially, and make sure that you're really tackling that first. And usually, what happens when you tackle the problem really well, that's where the business opportunity comes through, right? It really becomes evident, and really becomes clearer. So we always thought about solving the problem from the beginning. That's been very important to us. And when it comes to sort of like technology, the way we think about it, it sort of comes down to a few layers for us. There's the foundational, access to financial infrastructure in a country, right? So as I mentioned, like just sending a payment, right, takes time. You have to go into a branch manually. It's simple. You need to enter amount, when you're going to send that money and who you're sending it to. But for whatever reason, you still have to go to a physical location and do that. And I think the core access to financial rails is sort of that, let's say, the most bottom layer that we think about in terms of you have to get that right, obviously, to deliver anything on top of that, right? When it comes to automation and like real value for customers. Um, then we really started thinking about the workflow, the software that comes with that payment method. So, for example, when we talk about Canadian EFTs, right? There's a whole workflow that happens around you making that payment. And in the finance context, in any professional business context, you would want to capture your bill, make sure there's an attachment included, maybe assign a GL code or like a category to your payment, and make sure you have sufficient balances to pay that and write net terms to pay it on. So that's where I think the software layer really starts to play a big role. And usually those two used to be separate solutions, right? You would basically buy the payment rail, and again, maybe a pretty poor one, but you would get access to a payment rail through a bank, and then you would get separate software that helps you manage those payments on top of the bank, right? But they would never talk well to each other. And Canadian payments infrastructure and regulatory environment has always bifurcated those two solutions and never made them easily interoperable. So to us, bringing those two together alone felt like a massive unlock for businesses. And that's again something that we've been building since 2020 and have expanded very broadly now again across bill payments, cards, reimbursements, CAD USD business accounts, access to high interest rate, earnings on any cash you hold and float, access to a charge card limit that is underwritten in less than 24 hours for you, and none of that friction that you normally deal with when it comes to financial services in the country. So all of those have been really important and foundational to us from day one, and we've continued to build them out and accelerate what we do there. Um, but to your point, there's now this almost like third layer that's emerging, which is sort of intelligence, right, or automation that comes on top of it. And it's really fascinating what's happening in the space, and we've had our fair share of early launches in this category, in this domain already, that are driving tremendous impact. And then every single day you get reminded this is like the worst this technology will ever be. So I think what the ceiling is in terms of the kind of outcomes software can achieve for a business is just now incredibly much higher, right, than before. Um, we've from the beginning, for example, wanted to automate transaction coding for our customers. We always felt like that's a manual job that needs to go away. Before AI and LLMs, it was actually very difficult to do because every single accounting set of categories, GL codes, tax rates is very different business by business. So it was very hard to find like a normalized understanding of how to categorize transactions effectively. But with LLMs, especially with how smart they've gotten over the last few years, last year, or actually early this year, we launched for the first time our transaction coding agent, which now does uh, 90+% accuracy transaction coding for most of the business on float. And that is about 30% better than any of the leading models off the shelf that you would get to categorize your transactions. And we're now seeing that more than 70% of all transaction coding for customers is like automated, which is really exciting for us. And again, this is just the beginning, right? But it wouldn't be possible to get to this level of transaction coding automation, for example, without having built out all the payments rails. So that the second your transaction happens, your software tracks it correctly. It pulls in all the right data fields and metadata into that transaction record. And then when it comes to applying the right GL code, the intelligence can take action for you. All three layers really matter. And to us, when we think about the future of finance for Canadian businesses, which by the way, we think about that a lot at Float, we
Imagine.
believe that building across all three layers is really, really important. Yeah.
To a point that you made earlier too, like there's no ceiling on the innovation that you can have in the space with the state of the state today in July 2026, which is when we're recording this interview. But again, you had to actually put those rails up, and those payment rails had to actually be established. You had to actually know firsthand what are going to be the challenges and how you can acutely again solve them too. I think I just want to keep banging that drum about how you saw a problem and we're driving a solution to that specific problem, but also it compounds if we don't solve this problem immediately. And the way that we can actually get it done is by automating some things, not taking the intelligence out of it, but having it infuse what we can actually execute on the long term. So, I mean, I know we've talked a lot about the motivation behind it all, but tell me a little bit about your team. I would actually love to know some of the like brain power behind all of this because it's not all just off the shelf AI. That's what I really want to emphasize here. You guys got in the weeds with understanding the problem that you're tackling and making a robust solution for that problem that is going to be agile and evolutionary too. So tell me about some of the folks who are on your side and helping make this magic happen.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's great to be here and tell a story, but the team is doing all of the heavy lifting behind the scenes. So, um, yeah, we've been from the beginning. I think we've taken a few principal approaches to how we think about talent at Float. Um, we've probably leaned towards hiring probably more senior across the board. We always believe that a more empowered and end-to-end owning individual contributor will be effective alone than maybe a group of people, right? So minimizing headcount while maximizing outcomes, if that makes sense, is something that we've definitely thought about quite a lot as a company, as an organization. And even up until late last year, our engineering team was probably less than 40 engineers across the board with all the products that we build and develop, which is an incredible achievement, frankly, by the level of talent we've been able to bring on board to actually help us build this much product this quickly. Float is still less than 6 years old as a company, and be able to serve this many customers across the country with a group of people that's actually somewhat small, relatively speaking, especially when you benchmark to some international providers and players. And we've always taken that stance that a few really incredibly smart people can achieve way more than a really large group of people that maybe aren't operating the same bar and level. Um, to actually execute that is sort of the hard part, right? And I think a lot of the time we actually spent ourselves as a team, and also how we thought about even our talent team internally, is really making sure that obviously the bar of entry is really high. We do a few things internally that help us make sure that folks we bring on board are basically hell yes from everybody in the panel, right? We don't like soft, lukewarm reactions to candidates. We want everybody who joins us, their teammates, to feel like this is going to be the best person I will get to work with, and I'm really excited to work with this person. And that's the kind of reactions we look for very explicitly from our teams, which helped a lot to continue to bring stronger and stronger talent to the business, into the team over time. Obviously, a lot of things we do internally to make sure that folks have clear mandates and how they execute and what they're executing against. And maintaining the bar is really hard too. Takes a lot of managerial like courage and a lot of managerial action that's required there. But that's something that we've been holding the team accountable to and ourselves for a long time. And we believe that all those small things really compound and pay off down the road, and you end up with a team that can seem pretty lean, but can oversee just a vast breadth of product, right, and ship so much faster because you're now minimizing all this communications overhead and all this complexity that comes with really large workforce. So it takes a lot of discipline. You have to sort of like believe it and see it through before you fully realize the benefits of it. But if you commit to it, and if you're very intentional about it and you do it the right way, then we think it's by far the best, the most effective way to build company, and that's what we've taken with Float so far. Yeah.
I love everything you said there. I want to just draw a fine line under the discipline because I actually think that that is actually something that goes unsaid a lot of the time, that people actually have to be committed and their passion has to translate into a little bit of regimentation, just because you need to actually execute and you need to follow your own strategy and make sure that you're delivering on the points that you've established for yourself to grow the business. But what I love is that you actually kind of deliver that to your customers as well, because you're able to kind of put guardrails into like what they're delivering to their own clients. And I'd love to actually go into a little bit about the product offerings and the different service lines. Just because I know that you guys, I said in the beginning, have that card, but there's so much more that you're actually delivering here. And I want to make sure that we shine a light on that because it is a holistic approach that you're taking that is going to lift everybody in the ecosystem. And it's innovative in how you're deploying ML, AI, all the
Yeah.
above to
Yeah.
accomplish those goals. So tell me a little bit about like the differentiations and what we're accomplishing with these different service lines.
Totally, yeah, and there's many ways to slice and dice how we think about product, but maybe I'll just talk about like the company life cycle and journey, right?
Yeah.
And try to relate how we think about product in that lens. So, in the very beginning, something our mission statement is actually to empower Canadian businesses to achieve more, right? And a lot of it comes down to entrepreneurs, owner operators, founders who are doing the 0 to 1 part, right? Who are just getting started. Um, when you are getting started, the first thing you obviously need is some kind of uh, business account. You probably want to separate your personal finances from your corporate finances. So keep that cash separately. Maybe you raise capital. You want to put that money in somewhere at attractive rates. You might, have raised money in the USD, for example, or in the US, right? And you want to store that cash effectively too and convert maybe to CAD for payroll purposes, things like that. So, but you're still early stage, and a lot of your needs are somewhat simple. Let's say it's a lot of it is again access to financial rails and financial services at the ground level. So with Float, for example, you could sign up and in 15 minutes get access to our business accounts in CAD, USD currencies across either border, convert, store cash in any one of those accounts. At interest rates up to 3.5%, I believe, right now. we're offering, which is way higher than anything you'll get from a bank. If you look at your checking account, you'll probably get 0.00002% interest rate on that.
Roughly that.
Yeah. So we've always taken an approach of not trying to hide the cost benefits behind, or only to make cost benefits accessible to our smallest customers as well as our largest ones. So um, in commercial banking, unfortunately, that's the other way, at least in Canada. So we make high interest rates accessible with no lockups, no minimum commitments, in both CAD USD out of the box, with no friction. Then you start thinking about spinning up a card, so you can get a flow card both in CAD USD. Again, no problems. You can spin up a card probably in a couple clicks, in a couple seconds, and that will give you everything you need to spend, pay your online bills, pay your digital advertising costs, and things like that. You can do reimbursements from Float. So if you have maybe a couple people working for you now, you can reimburse them directly through Float as well. Capture the receipts, categorize transactions, get that workflow complete as well. And finally, you might have contractors or vendors you pay to. So Float also offers, cross-border CAD USD, international payments out of the box. You can do wires, ACH, EFT, everything within one account. So you can effectively run your business as an owner operator with zero friction. Never have to go to a branch in person. You get access to a credit limit through our charge offering as well, and spend on cards. So you don't have to ever deal with the complexity of the legacy financial institutions in the country. Our support team median response time is less than 1 minute, and it's the one area where we've been actually probably less AI pilled on purpose, because we believe support is exceptionally important, and we actually like when our team talks to customers, and we know our customers like to talk to our team too. So we've done some automations there, but we haven't gone full aggressive. You never get to talk to a human ever again approach, and we don't think that's the right one, frankly. Um, and as you scale, as you grow as a business, you then probably hire an accountant, or you might hire a full-time finance person. That person can now come in, take over your float account from you as an owner operator, right? Run all of your finances on that system in one place. Do all of your, again, payments, but at much larger scale. Float offers all types of approval workflows, all types of controls around spend, user management, permission, access control. Actually, a pretty sophisticated layer and suite of software to help you manage that spend once it starts to scale. And The other benefit specifically we find for finance teams is this like AI operational leverage, right? So where Float starts to categorize transactions for your team automatically, and basically helps you streamline all of your transaction coding in a month end. So you're not spending time chasing employees for receipts. You're not spending time, like manually uploading stuff into the system. Float does the coding for you. Float captures and matches receipts for you directly, automatically in the app. All of that fun stuff. You can text us a receipt literally the second you swipe the card, and we'll match it to the right transaction, which is still pretty exciting feature for a lot of our customers, even though it's been out for quite some time now with Load. But a lot of these things that normally take a lot of manual overhead, like think about how much time it's taking you to fill out your last expense report, and imagine doing it as simple as swipe your card, you get a text, reply for receipt, and you're done, right? And that's how long it takes. And we obviously now also serve like much bigger companies and teams as well, 1,000+ employee companies too. So Float software and again, AI really scales to much larger use cases as well. We don't really play like in the enterprise market. We don't think that's really where we want to go, frankly, long term.
Yeah.
But customers from, a handful of employees up to thousands of users, you can run your entire business in Float and streamline your financial workflow as much as possible. Yeah.
Well, I think that last point you just made there is what makes Float such an attractive offering to anybody in the SMB space or even the mid-market space, because you get enterprise capabilities with your tool set, and you're actually delivering the agility that these teams need to be responsive, but also to deliver on what they have promised too. So, I mean, yeah, I think that's the biggest point. Our Googles, our Amazons, they've had the budgets to actually do all of this stuff for a long time. You're making it accessible now, at a scale that SMBs can actually latch onto and learn more about their customers, learn how to deliver better for their customers and also not have to overextend their resources because you actually have baked that in. And that's invaluable. So,
And you touched on SMB point. Maybe I'll double click on that because it's actually really important to us to make sure we, give Canadian SMBs access to services that traditionally they would never have access to, right? What we actually saw in the beginning when we just started working on Float is that Canada was almost like uniquely underserved in this category. That there's
yes.
bad, banking experiences everywhere in the world, right? But what made Canada unique was this sort of like dual problem where we saw that local players, there's not a lot of competition and there's no a lot of incentives to innovate, and they're not great at building software or modern experiences. And you might have witnessed this, through personal banking, for example, and experiences like that. But they're way behind, and there's no hope that they will catch up anytime soon. And you have international providers that really focus on the software layer, but don't do a good job of localizing the community customer needs. And when you don't bring those two together, it actually becomes very challenging to again lean into automation, lean into streamlining your workflows and things like that. So to us, it's been very important to, as I mentioned earlier, give access of the full benefit of the financial infrastructure we have in Canada to a business from the day they incorporate, and not gated behind an account manager that you have to call at your bank and spend 4 hours in a call with just to convince them to give you access to a trade desk so you can get lower FX fees, right?
Yeah.
So it's been very important to us to make this financial service as accessible as possible. And that's how we believe we will achieve our mission, right? Which is about igniting the full potential of community businesses. To us, it's very important that, financial infrastructure, access to capital, all of that becomes way easier in Canada so you can actually focus on building a business. Yeah.
No, and it's again, like your understanding of what the actual barriers are to entry for a lot of this is what's making the difference here. It's not just because you put an AI around it or you put some ML behind it. It's because you know what the actual problem is. You know, as a human, the path to actually solving all of this. And you're empowering SMBs, which I think is actually a huge thing that goes unspoken in the community. Again, enterprises have access, they have budgets. This is actually a one-stop shop for a lot of what you need to do to run a successful and also scalable business, without losing sight of, like, what your actual reality is today and what you can actually deliver tomorrow. You're gonna make sure that none of that gets lost in the sauce, more or less. But, yeah,
Yeah.
Rosa, this is music to my ears. I absolutely love it. So, last question, what's next for the rest of, 2026 for you guys?
Yeah, I mean, we just closed a pretty big round of capital that we were really excited about. I think practically speaking, we're, back to building. We've tried to stay as focused on building this whole time as possible. And, the roadmap is very exciting to us. We think we're just getting started in terms of what we can deliver in terms of, as I mentioned, access to financial services, capital, being able to help you centralize all of your expenses, unlock the leverage of, AI in your workflows of business, and your finance teams. So for us, we're just getting started, and it feels still very early in the journey. I think Flow probably serves like just under 1% of all Canadian businesses today, and to us, going to capture the rest 99% of the market is where we want to go next. And we'll spend a lot of time, making our products as great as possible, and also, getting the word out there that there's other options as well in the market. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I know I'm personally excited to hear all of this just because I have felt these challenges that you've described personally. So I love to hear that you guys have developed this for the Canadian market. I think there is so much expansion opportunity for you guys, well beyond even that. So can't wait to see what you do in 2026 and beyond. And Russell, I can't thank you enough for joining us. This was fantastic and a good, I think, model that I want our listeners to follow in terms of making sure that they're focused on solving a problem, not just building a business, solving a problem. The theme of the show at this point. But this was fantastic.
Yeah. Thanks for organizing this. This is great.